Good morning. Nice to have you all here, and thank you, Razak, for starting out with the introductions. Great. So my name is Yinka David West, and I will be leading this session just around a component of our our product development lab. And that product development lab is really, I think it's about an 8-week project that we take FSP teams, and these are interdisciplinary teams, through the whole process of preparing to build a new product or amend or revise an existing product, prototyping that product, and then piloting that product. So it's a lot of work, and it entails the whole team, because it's, products are not developed in isolation, and they need the participation of all the team members in general. So this morning, what we typically do within the lab is to share snippets with individuals who are interested in product development, but not necessarily have organizational buy-in or full team support to attend the lab. But then again, so our mission is really, how do we begin to extend and also stoke the interest on human-centered product development, which is a different specialization in general. So in today's workshop, we're going to go through a very small part of it, which is this issue about creating personalized customer experiences to increase product adoption and customer loyalty. And why is this important? Because we live in this digital world today. And if you realize the world we live in today, everybody wants things differently, everybody does things differently. And from a product perspective, we build one product, and what we're trying to do is, how can that one product satisfy the needs of multiple people? And that's the thinking. So it goes back to, who are the multiple people? How do we aggregate their needs and their goals and their aspirations to ensure that, while we might not be able to get 100%, depending on the product and the personas or the target segment we're trying to target, how do we get close to 90%? Now, I'm sure all of you here have used products and services that maybe after the first day or the second day, you stopped using them. Why? Just sit for a moment and ponder, why did I stop using that product or service? And think about it. Was it that the product didn't meet your needs? Was it that you did not like the experience you got from the product? Or was it that the product just didn't work? And so when you think in that manner, you're also going to be positioning and thinking of how your customer, or empathizing on how your customer accepts and receives your own products and services. And that's the whole idea of human-centered design. We want to flip the narrative and look at it from the customer's perspective and make it as customer-centric as possible. So at SIDFS, this is something that we've been doing for the last 3 years. And SIDFS is almost a 6-year-old initiative that was formed within the Lagos Business School. And our goal really with this lab is to support FSPs to develop affordable products that will serve excluded Nigerians, especially those poor rural women and rural dwellers. And why is this important? Because if you go back to the tenets and what we're trying to achieve is really financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, by looking at the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, is really also a challenge amongst women, where we have an 8% gender gap, rural dwellers, youth, people who are poor. So if we want to grow the basket beyond the 52 million that have BVNs or have registered for BVNs and are able to bank, if we want to grow the basket, how do we grow the basket to meet these people? And this is really about 3 things when we talk about financial inclusion. It's about affordability. Are the products or services affordable? Hence the need for digital, because if we're doing things digitally, right, we should be able to do more at a lower cost. When you look at the unit economics of it, it's cheaper to deploy technology than to deploy human beings, because the coverage area of human beings is limited as well. So that's affordability. Accessibility is another challenge that we look at when we're trying to address the poor, because or the underserved, because at the end of the day, they live in rural areas, they don't have access to maybe the same type of technology, or they might not even have access to technology and might need to use third parties like agents. So accessibility is another thing that we think about. The next thing we think about is availability or appropriateness. And when we look at availability or appropriateness, what we're really trying to talk about or distill is that the products or services that we're distributing, are they available and are they appropriate for that group of user? Yes, so when you think about it in that way, appropriateness means, see, does this product or service meet the needs of a rural farmer? Does it meet the needs of a market woman trading in a rural area, etc.? And that's how we need to think around it. So one of the findings in the work that we've been doing over the years is that there is a product market gap. In other words, the products that you lot are all distributing and creating are not really meeting the needs of the poor, the women, the underserved. And hence, if we want to address financial inclusion, we need to empower financial service providers to enable them create products that can meet these needs and ensure that we can address and move the needle. So that's the thesis behind what we do. So today's workshop is focused on just a snippet of the lab, and that's really looking at customer journeys across different touch points and how do we create unique experiences that will reduce customer churn. And if you recall, I started with you all as an example. When last did you use a particular product or service that you downloaded and increase and enhance loyalty? So we don't want people to download our products or use our products once and then dump them. We want them to use them continually because that's how we build loyalty, that's how we get customer engagement, etc. And this is all through a product called the Customer Journey Map and enabling and enhancing the user experience. So let me start with the introduction. So customer journey mapping is really about, from the time the customer is introduced to the product, right? And when they buy or use the product or go through the customer journey, what do they do? How do they see the product? How do they see the service? So it's really about mapping, building a roadmap from when the customer is introduced to the product, in other words, when he becomes aware of the product, and how are you going to make a certain customer aware of your product? And you see, the thing about this is about being very systematic and not making assumptions that, oh, this customer will just know one way or the other, or he'll dream of my product and all of a sudden he's using my product. But how will he know about the product? How will you onboard him? How will, and so you have to go through the stages systematically to ensure that we're building something that can truly work. So the customer journey map is a visual representation of how users are interacting with the product or service at different stages and use at different touch points. Okay, and we'll go through some of these details in a bit as well. So before we do that, let's look at this quiz, right? And let me just read this, and I would appreciate some feedback because this is not supposed to be me doing all the talking, right? So this is Aisha. Aisha runs a small store, right? Beside an ATM. The market where her shop is located is also close to a bank, but Aisha prefers to use an agent whenever she needs to make withdrawals. Why do you think so? Any thoughts? Anybody wants to sort of delve into the mind of Aisha and realize that, we don't all behave in rational ways? Anyone? Nobody? Good morning. Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay. My name is Damian. So I believe that Aisha actually go for that because of the relationship, one, she has with the agent and also the personalized service she gets from the agent. Thank you. And trust as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So you said three things, right? Incentives, the relationship, as well as the trust factor.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Thank you very much, Damien. Any other thoughts? It could be due to her customer experience with the agent. Exactly. So Adekunle is also saying that. Zainab is also saying trust. So you see that these are fundamental things that we need to address. And then time management, transportation. Okay, Obande, but don't forget that We've said that the ATM is next to her shop. There is a branch located near her, so she doesn't have those pecuniary costs to deal with in this sense, okay? Yes, so other than what you've spoken about, another challenge Aisha has is this. The machine don't swallow my card two times. When I come out my shop to go to the bank the next day and then collect my money for new card. So I know they use ATM again. Now agent they use. Even if the transaction no go, I fit come out my card, go to another agent, right? So again, the experience of the ATM swallowing your card, number one. The experience of the ATM not dispensing is another problem that Aisha has. So this is not just about the issues around trust, issues around availability and stuff. It's also an issue around availability, which is reliability. How reliable are the services that are close to Aisha? And don't forget also that if she goes to the bank branch, if she goes to the bank branch or she goes to the ATM, her transaction fee might actually be free. But when she goes to an agent, she's willing to pay a premium. So this mindset of, oh, people don't want to pay is actually wrong. People would pay for what they know and what they can guarantee will work, okay? So it's also about how much do we know or understand about people like Aisha to enable us actually work with them, fit into their psyche, and ensure that we can actually get to a win-win position. So some other people in the chat are saying, oh, freedom of choice or flexibility, exactly. I want to be able to choose whatever I want to do. Ignorance can be a factor to true Oluchi, but let's assume that in this case, Aisha already knows that there's an ATM next to her, there's a bank nearby, but you know what? She's comfortable with this agent. And one of the things we're going to look at later on is, let's think about Aisha's journey using the customer journey mapping process and visualize it and realize that, oh, Tolu's saying that it's all about trust, right? Visualize it, realize that, see, if we want to build customer loyalty and engagement and retain our customers, we need to be, so you're all saying trust, trust, trust. How do we build trust? Because don't forget that technology, and I look at what she says, if the ATM won't swallow my card, because if the transaction doesn't go through, I will have my card back and I will be able to go to another agent, right? But if the ATM swallows my card, not only do I lose the card, I also have to pay for a replacement card. So that's even going to cost her extra 1,000 naira, other than the time she has to leave her shop to go to the bank and get a new card. So you can see now that, yes, so when we said time management and transportation costs were not issues, they're issues when it comes to the replacement option, etc. So these are the types of people we need to start thinking about. They're not sitting in an air-conditioned AC, they don't have Zoom, they're just happily going about their business and just want things to work around their own schedules, not around our own schedules in that sense. So what is this customer journey? And why do we think that the customer journey is important? First of all, like we said, we need to identify opportunities to improve the customer experience. Because, you know, in the world we live in today, someone said flexibility. Flexibility is choices, right? I can choose whatever I want to do. I can choose wherever I want to do it. I can choose whoever I want to do it with. So really the days of, oh, this is your bank, this is your branch, and you stay there for 40 years. And the same thing we're looking at even in the employment space, where we're talking about the great resignations and the mindset of people today is that I'm not going to work in an organization for 30, 40 years like our parents did. I'm just going to work for 2 years, 3 years, and if I don't like it, I move, okay? So those kinds of experiences about improving customer experience for your different personas or customer segments. And then even going back to the example I just used in terms of human resources and employees only staying with you for 2 or 3 years before moving. In that 2 or 3 years, the dilemma now for human resources is, what is the employee experience that we want to create? that builds affinity with that organization. So whether we're talking about it from a customer perspective, from an employee perspective, or as we say, internal and external customers, the thinking is the same. And the objective is that we don't want our customers to leave us. And when they leave us, we want more loyal and satisfied customers that will continue using our products and services. Because don't forget that the more a customer uses your product and service, the lower the cost, the unit cost economics in terms of your development and your reach in general. So that's the thinking of why customer journey mapping is important. Now, another reason it's important is that in the digital space, we know that we're building digital tools. So we look at the user interface. So does it work well? You know, when I was in technology and we're building products for Windows, we're always mindful that, oh, how in sync was the user interface to the Windows user interface, to the extent where will my keyboard shortcuts also work on that app, etc., on that interface as well. So you are mindful of the user interface. But in this world that we live in now, we need to look beyond the interface and say, you know what is the user experience? Because even if you give them a good user interface, and that means navigation works properly, colors work properly, but you haven't thought through the flow and the interactivity between the user and the solution, then you might have a good interface, but not a good experience. Hence, if you look at the world of work today and what we're looking at, a lot of job descriptions are around, UI, UX, right? Not just user interface, but user experience, because the two are almost go hand in hand today, but the thinking around the two and the capabilities around the two are totally different, and we need to be mindful of that. So today, we're going to use the customer journey map to help us understand how to design customer experiences. And when we talk about a customer journey, there's a customer life cycle around everything, every product or service, whether you're buying tin tomatoes or you're buying financial services. And the journey map is 5 steps, right? First of all, awareness. How do we build awareness for our products? Some people say, above the line marketing, for example, which is television adverts, newspaper adverts, billboards, etc., helps build awareness. But then again, if you're in the advertising industry, you'll hear a lot of people asking advertisers, what is the footfall from this advert? In other words, or what is how many eyeballs are seeing this advert, etc. So we need to get that specific information around what is going on. Otherwise, you're putting up a billboard, and is it reaching the right type of customer that you're trying to serve? When you build the awareness, the next is how do you convert that person from just knowing to actually signing up for your product or service? So in the case of a new product in a supermarket, it's other than, when you go into shop right now, you'll see that they have a lot of merchandisers on the floor, because what they're trying to do is not just help you build awareness, but also convert you into buying that product there or then, right? So the next thing you have to think about is how do we onboard? How do we convert? How do we sign up people? And this is where some of us use market activations and different things like that, or referral schemes, etc. Okay, so I've signed up for this product, right? I have it. So we've ticked another box, right? We're closer to the promised land. The next thing is, how do you get someone to use it the first time? And for each of these, the engagement or the experience is different. So you have to systematically think around it and say, okay, because I've downloaded something doesn't mean I'm going to use it, or because I've signed up for something doesn't mean I'm going to use it immediately. So how do you get someone to use it for the first time? Are you going to incentivize and say, oh, your first call is free? For example, I remember when the telco started, they used to do a lot of things like that. Oh, the first time you do this, you're going to get so much benefit. So you're encouraged to do it because it's not costing you the same amount of money. After doing it the first time, we don't make money from when someone does something once. We make money from repeat transactions. So how do we ensure that someone uses this? And how do we build that continued usage? And then don't forget that, again, all things are not the same. In other words, nothing stays the same. As you're doing all these things, your competition is reacting, everybody else is reacting and readjusting themselves. So how do you continue advocating for your product or service so people don't switch or people don't port, as we say? And that's how you need to think around your customer, because your customer, and all these things can happen, like steps 1 to 4 can happen, or steps 1 to 3 can happen within 5 minutes, or within 5 days, or within 5 months, or within 5 years. And it really depends on how much engagement you put into it, into ensuring that you shorten that period. And then you continue, you have iterative processes around step 4, and then also advocating continuously in step 5. And that's what the customer journey is really about. So when we're talking about the customer journey, there are 5 elements we need to think about. So the phases is what we've talked about already, 6 elements actually. So we've talked about the phases in the customer journey itself, or the life cycle of a customer. That's the first thing. The second thing is the touch points, right? And these are interaction points. So for example, I've used several touch points already as examples. I've used the billboard as a touch point. I've used the supermarket as a touch point when I spoke about ShopRite, right? I've used television adverts as a touch point. So these are points where the customer interacts with the product and what he or she interacts with, etc., signing up for an account, purchasing goods, etc., etc. Then another thing we need to think about is actions or activities. And this is really, again, how do we get to know our customers in such a way that, like when you look at somebody like Aisha, what are the actions or activities Aisha is taking at the specific touch points? So if we say Aisha is going to use a billboard or is going to use an agent, when does that happen in the life of Aisha? So you have to sort of engage and say, what is a day in the life of Aisha? And one of the engagements that we do before we get to this stage of the lab is we go out and we send our lab participants out to interview customers, right? Interview customers and the types of customers we want to talk to, understand from them several things around their ecosystem. What are their aspirations? What do they have? What do they own? What do they owe, etc., etc. What's important to them? And then we also get them to tell us a little bit about themselves and their networks using a household map, right? And that household map gives you an idea as to what's important to her, who are the people in her first tier, her second tier, and her third tier, etc. Because everybody has a network, okay? So we want to understand those key activities and key moments. We also want to envisage what is Aisha talking about, because you see, when you hear things in the words of your customer, it resonates. It's not, and again, in the language they use as well, because if they're speaking to us in broken English, right, or in pidgin English, and we want to now converse with them or engage with them in Queen's English, then there's going to be a mismatch, right? If they're speaking to us in Yoruba, and that's the persona of customer we're trying to reach, then how do we also speak back to them in the language they're used to receiving? So there's no alienation, there's no feeling of discrimination or exclusion in that sense. So we want to sort of get some words in terms of what are the customer's questions or thoughts at a specific moment on their journey. And then again, what are the feelings and why feelings are important? And this is where, when you begin to do your field work, it's also important to begin to understand unspoken things, emotions, because in our decision making, especially as individuals, a lot of our decisions are made based on emotions. So what are those emotions? Is it confusion? Is it fear? Is it skepticism, etc.? So we need to learn how to read these things, because when we say we want to build trust, building trust is about addressing some of these emotions that our customers are going through and using the right mechanisms to address them, okay? And then the final thing is that, they say there's an opportunity everywhere, right? The final thing is that what are the opportunities that we can harness from each of these interaction points or engagement points or areas? What opportunities can we harness and how can we build on them as learning moments, upselling moments, or cross moments in general? Because there are always opportunities, but we have to also create the moment for them or be aware when the moment occurs so we can capitalize on them. And the tool we're going to use is called the customer journey map. And again, it takes us through on the top, on the horizontal top, we have the life cycle or the customer journey that we're trying to map. And on the left-hand side, in terms of this matrix, on the left-hand side, we also have what we call the different activities that we're going to engage in, or the customer activities. So we have the key moments, the touch points, the customer thoughts, customer feelings, and what are the opportunities that will emanate from this relationship, okay? So now, I always like to, we've presented the case of Aisha, and the whole idea is, okay, so how did Aisha get to using an agent? And how did she make that conversion or that switch from using a bank branch or an ATM to using an agent? So the example we're going to use today is a bank that we created called Super Agency Banking. And we're going to take you through Aisha's customer journey around Super Agency Banking. But before I do that, we've had more people join us. Welcome. Any questions at this point in time? Any questions, please? Okay, so we have the chat for questions when you're able to, but it's always nice to sort of pose the question so we don't get lost or we don't lose people in the conversation. Okay, so this is Aisha's journey map, and I'll just read you through it and to see the level of detail that's required. So let's say on awareness. So what's Aisha doing at that time? She's going to have her stop, right? She hears a radio jingle in her keke about agency banking. And Aisha is like, whoa, 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 these people have come again, right? They're always advertising everywhere for everywhere, Sha. Which one be super agents again, right? And that's really what she's asking herself. When you hear something here, you're like, well, they come, which one? What's the big deal about this one again? And so this, the opportunity here is that, again, if you think about the number of people that commute in public transportation, either on keke or in Danfo or in BRT, those are also opportunity moments. How do we engage people on that commute, right? So how do we build, it's almost like when you're on a plane, for example, there are people who sell their adverts specifically to the airline, knowing that, oh, you're going to have a captive audience for 6 hours and there's nowhere they're going to. So how do we convert those moments or those transport moments, because everybody commutes one way or the other, right, into opportunity moments, right? Number one. Number two, so we're now looking at onboarding. Don't forget that Aisha is now in her neighborhood, right? So she passes the shop of her neighborhood agent and she sees super sticker and she's like, isn't that what I heard yesterday? So again, that's surprise. So she's surprised that all of a sudden, this thing I'm hearing on the radio is already in my neighborhood. Okay, so now, wow, this agency thing don't reach here. And she knows Mama Bimbo. So she's like, Mama Bimbo, when did you port to become agent, right? That's really her own inquisitiveness and surprise. So Mama Bimbo, again, is another opportunity to help Aisha communicate the benefits of an agent, sell the user and register her as a user and sign her up. So Mama Bimbo is an onboarding person in that sense. So at that point, Aisha knows, she trusts Mama Bimbo. They laugh together every day. All of a sudden, Mama Bimbo has opened another business line, which Aisha can be a party to, right? And then in terms of first-time use, again, Mama Bimbo should also be that person to sort of say, okay, Aisha, come and try this thing now, right? Shay, you want to collect money from ATM. Oh yeah, come, let me do it for you, right? So Aisha is a bit excited. Let me kuku test it. Now, after all, is Mama Bimbo. She know if you chop my money. Because that's the first thing that comes to mind, right? Going to a stranger versus going to somebody that's already familiar to you. So this is another teaching moment for Aisha to learn how to use the product and more about agency banking, etc., right? Mama Bimbo is an influencer. Yes, Laulu, but she's also a sales agent. And so, but it's about how do you use people like this in a way that also is win-win for everybody. Then again, so Aisha has done her first test. She withdraws money from Mama Bimbo. Mama Bimbo gives her the 2K she wanted to withdraw. Now, so how do we get Aisha to continue using it? So Aisha routinely passes Mama Bimbo's shop on her way home and then starts to make withdrawals. And she's now like, it's so convenient that she doesn't have to carry money with her as she's commuting back home. Mama Bimbo is somebody she knows. And then this agency banking, it makes sense. No queue, no ATM swallowing her card, etc., etc. But then again, another moment, what else can Aisha do with Mama Bimbo? What other financial transactions? How do we educate her, etc., etc.? So we have a new savings product. Aisha, instead of withdrawing 1.5 every other day, why don't you start saving 500 of that and start managing yourself? Those are kind of messages that we can pass on to Aisha. And then advocacy. See now, Aisha too has spotted, right? She too wants to become an influencer. So Aisha has now decided that she can be an agent now, and she recommends friends and stores to use her agency and shares and there's excitement about, she can increase her footfall and her income fall by just also serving other people. And she's like, as well as doing her market, this super agent thing don't change my life. I know they queue for bank again now, they make money on top, right? So that's the kind of way we think around the customer journey. So not only did this is Aisha that had a problem with ATM and cards, but we've kept her not only as a bank user and a bank customer, but we've also even extended her to become a bank partner by becoming an agent. Okay, any questions, any comments? I have something in the chat. Uptime is very key, not just familiarity. Yes, so again, this, you see, Obande, you're bringing up other factors and other considerations in, which we're not ignoring, but in this process, we're looking specifically as how do we maintain or how do we reach customers and engage and improve a customer experience using customer journey mapping as a tool. There are other dimensions and other factors, because again, if Mama Bimbo's POS is down, that also creates another problem that again, let's assume all things are equal in this sense. But again, you find out that familiarity trust is embedded within familiarity, and that based on that, onboarding becomes easier. Okay? Any questions? I don't see any hands. No hands. Okay. But you see, the whole idea of a workshop is not for us to just talk and have a monologue. It's for you all to also engage in the product. So why we believe customer journey mapping, and what are some of the best practices around customer journey mapping? The first is, first of all, it's better to map a persona. And when we say a persona is an attribute of a person or a demo of a person with certain attributes. So when we fix on a persona, and if you look at some of the work we've done on customer segmentation in Nigeria, so we have several personas around a digital youth, a vulnerable believer, etc. So when you target that kind of group or a certain group, and so you know more about their demographics, you know more about their aspirations and their psychometrics, right? It's easier to build a journey map, right? Rather than trying to say, I'm just going to build for one person. So you build for groups, you build in groups. And again, another thing I want to say here is that it is possible to have several journey maps for different customer groups, or different segments. And then the challenge for you in the build phase is, how do you build one product that can actually give customers different experiences? And this is where a behavioral testing tool, which is A or B testing, will now come into play. In other words, how do you ensure that you can build engagement and experience to different groups of customers using the same tool? Okay, so basically, we believe that these journey maps are better because they reduce the number of steps a customer needs to take to achieve their goals and leads them back to higher conversion rates. And don't forget that as a product developer, as a product manager, it's not just about building the product, but it's about conversion rates of the product and the use of the product. interrogating existing customer behaviors for better insights. And it needs a lot of engagement with customers, because again, the bottom line is that real users give real feedback. They will tell you if your product sucks or not, right? They won't sort of cushion it. They'll just tell you, I don't like this, I don't like that. And it's important to listen, right? And journey maps should be living documents, and review them periodically, because don't forget that as we evolve and grow through a process or a project, we're always looking for new things. And this is where, even in the journey mapping process, it's always nice to start and say, okay, start with the simple and then build on complexity, rather than trying to start with complex and then lose people in the process. Customer-facing staff are key resources of customer insights and pain points. So when people, how observant are we when people are using the ATM? What frustrates people? How many steps do they need to take to get 20K from the ATM, right? And these are things that we should be monitoring and guiding, rather than, so for example, if you think about the ATM, someone like me, I want to do it in 2 steps, right? Some other people want to first check balance, want to do this, want to do that. So how do you build an ATM interface or an ATM experience that satisfies someone like me that wants to do it in 2 steps, versus somebody like somebody else that wants to go through a whole long series of checking balance, etc., etc. And those are the challenges that we need to think about. Journey mapping is not only about upselling or cross-selling, it's about improving customer engagement and experience. And if you're doing it right, your product and updates and customer service will be proactive, not reactive, right? So it's also about how do we design change into our product set and our product journey and our own product development journey and iterations in that sense. So at this point, I'm going to pause now for another question and answer if anybody has anything that's niggling them. And then we'll go into group sessions to try it out on our own using several examples that we've created for you all. So this is your last opportunity to ask a question before you go and get your hands dirty. Any questions? Yes, please go ahead. Oladele.
Yes, thank you, madam. It's been an eye-opening session so far. I would like to know, while you're working actively with customers to identify products, new products and services, how do you deliver, how do you determine that what you're trying to create would be something of potential value to these customers?
Okay, thank you very much, Oladele. So the first thing we do in the lab is we start with, first of all, what is the opportunity we identify? And again, there must be some opportunity that we see or gap that we've addressed in the market that we're trying to address, right? And then we go out into the field and try and test that opportunity. And what do we mean by test that opportunity? We go and talk to customers. We go and understand and build that, is this opportunity really an opportunity for this type of customer that we say we want to address? So if you say, I want to address, let's say downfall drivers, right? You have to go out and talk to downfall drivers or conductors and say, we're trying to, this is the thinking. We want to build a solution around payments and collections, for example, and downfall payments. What are the challenges you're having? What do you think will work? And listening to them, because it's not, so a lot of the time, what I see today is that a lot of product developers come, we say, I have an app. And the first thing I ask is, what is that? What problem is it solving? And a lot of the time we've built a product, but we don't have a problem. So it's a bit of a harder sell. So the whole idea of this is, how do we build a solution for a problem that already exists, not a solution that is looking for a problem to exist, okay? And then by the time you do your customer interviews, then you go through a product prototyping session, and we do 2 types of prototyping: low fidelity prototyping, which is either a paper prototyping or some limited interactive digital prototyping. And then we also take you through high fidelity prototyping before we come to, okay, what needs to be built and when, right? What needs to be built and when? And that's now going into the piloting stage, when we're now thinking about, okay, what do we build and when? So there is more to it than meets the eye, but it first goes back to, what is the opportunity, or what is the problem? Who does that problem exist for? Because it doesn't exist for everybody. And then before we go into the trying to build what it should look like, etc. I hope that answers your question, Oladele.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so another great question here. And Henry says, when a customer journey is designed, what is the best way to test the efficacy of the journey design? Are there cues to help ascertain if the design is a pass or a fail? Well, you see, again, the best way to go back and test this design, Henry, is to build a prototype, right? And then go and test out the prototype in terms of what is their natural and instinct and intuitive way of using the prototype. And Emmanuel, and when we talk about building a prototype, that means you're going to have artifacts, for example. So you create a scenario, you go and talk to the type of customer, you say, okay, what do you do first? What happens here? What happens there, etc. And then you test your own theory. But again, we hope that a lot of these things you're going to build will be built in co-creation, in collaboration with the customer. In other words, you go out and engage a market woman, or you go and observe a market woman. Rather than, and observation is a very important skill set that we need. That because in building a product, it has to be intuitive to the user, which means we have to understand how does the user work, how does she operate, how does she use, what are her money flows, for example. So if, for example, if somebody is paying a supplier in cash, and you don't, and then she needs to have cash at 7 a.m., for example, if she's in the food industry, when the supplier brings the food from mile 12. So if she can't have this money at 7 a.m., then she loses her market opportunity for the day. So little things like that are really about the customer journey. And another thing I want to emphasize is, when Obande said uptime is critical, that also gives us evidence around what are the other dependencies in our organization that we need to address to ensure that we can actually meet the customer's goals and objectives. Yes, thank you. So Damien, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. It has been very, very educative so far. So I just want to find out a situation whereby, like you said, you've actually carried out more like a market research, and you've discovered a lot of things and let's say problems that we can provide solutions to. Now, how do we determine what move from the sprint to development stage? That's number one. Then number two, talking about touch point, I know there are a lot of variables and things that can be used. So how do we actually measure the most effective of all that gets to customers and actually get them to onboard or use your product or come back and use it over and over again? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Damien. Great questions. And let me start with the second one. And this is where in any product development process, some of the things you always need to do is build in monitoring and evaluation indicators. So when you're talking about, how do we know which is the most effective? What indicators have we built in, and what resources do we put down to go and actually get the data? Because the bottom line is that without the data, we can't do anything. We can't do very much. So it's also, and that's one of the things we do in the pilot stage of the lab. We take people through thinking around, okay, how are you going to, what are the indicators of success? In other words, what does success look like? How are you going to monitor it? How frequently are you going to monitor it? Because you need that feedback from the field. That's the second question. And the first question was, you've done market research, right? So market research throws up many possibilities. And what we are saying is that market research is not the same as customer research. Market research is just saying, okay, what are the general trends and possibilities within a market? So you can, one way to select is, first of all, look at which one has the biggest problem, or which one is the most common problem amongst the market research from the market research that you did, number one. Number two is, again, you can only do something you have capability or competency to do. Another thing that we ask people to do in the lab is identify their own internal capabilities. Because even when you've identified a problem within the organization, is your organization ready and able to address that problem? Because there is no point in starting a project when you know that all the dots don't connect in your organization. So it's also a way to do an organizational an organizational analysis and assessment as to, are we ready to be able to pull this kind of thing off? Because you can't start and stop. Otherwise you lose. Don't forget that not all things stay equal, right? Because once you start, your competition knows that, oh, there's some activity or opportunity here, they will jump at it. So it's also organizational readiness you need to be mindful of. Otherwise, you start something and you're not able to take it to completion. And that's why product development is not cheap. Because by the time you think about the M&E, how do you continually go back into the market to collect data about your product, right? Because you will have some transaction level or sign-up level data, but you don't know what that relates with in the real sense of So how are you going to enumerate this data from the field and do it periodically? And all those things have costs associated with them. And then what sample size do you want to use? So there are many things that you need to think about and think through in that sense, especially from the monitoring and evaluation perspective. Okay. So Rotimi is asking a question. Great thoughts and well-articulated customer journey design is in response to problems or issues identified. Product development must actually meet needs. Information data is critical. Thank you for the insight. So that's Rotimi's contribution. And Rotimi, you see, the whole idea of this is using an evidence base, number one. And don't forget that the objective is not to say we have products. The objective is to say we have products that people can use and people use continually. We want products that people who are underserved will sign up for. We want products that are appropriate to their needs, and we want to increase our market share. So we need to be very deliberate and design around a good product development process to ensure that we meet the goals. Because there's no point in, and a lot of the time, what we've seen with some teams in the lab is that we're not going to start again and reinvent the wheel and say we're building a new product. We're going to take a product that we feel hasn't done so well, and we're going to rethink or redesign this product around a certain persona, and then just go through that process and that thinking to ensure that we can actually refine our product and refine the effort to ensuring that it meets the goals and satisfies both organizational benefits as well as individual benefits. Hey, Hosa, good to see you again. Yes, products that address customer needs are the most important, because there's no point in addressing a future need if you haven't addressed a today need. Yes, thank you. Zaradin, I hope I pronounced that right.
Yes, it's right.
Zaradin, yes.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the very educative program. Now, mine is like a concern, actually. In order to get a product that will serve customer needs and will ensure satisfaction, a lot of things has to be done. Research and development is one thing, and we would agree that it is costly. While also you were taking us through the customer journey, you made mention of process of awareness and then moving to onboarding, where at times or most of the time you have to incentivize that to get people to actually get on board. So if you look at the whole thing in totality, it means it's adding to the cost of the product. And then you would also agree with me that in this part of the world, we don't patronize products that are expensive. So how do you get to, or how do you manage to keep these things on the low to also ensure that these prices are affordable, which will further make these customers want to onboard more?
Great questions, Zaradin. And you see, that's why we go through this process, and that's why we run the lab. So we appreciate that, first of all. It's a double-edged sword, right? Product development is not cheap. You need significant human, financial, and knowledge resources to do it effectively. But then again, what we're also saying is, how do we help and support FSPs to do this effectively? And the gap we're trying to close is the knowledge gap. because there is a lot more that goes into product development than we think. And so we're trying to say, how do we help bridge this gap? Hence the whole idea of running sessions like this, running the lab, because it's important for all of us to ensure that we can actually achieve financial inclusion. So the bottom line about this product development is it helps give us insights as to what is required, and also helps give the management of institutions comparative insights as to what resources are required and how best can we ensure we deploy the resources appropriately for success. Because right now, Zaradin, we're deploying resources, but are we succeeding? So how do we harness and harmonize those resources to ensure that we can succeed? Like I said again, we know that the one product might not need to be used by multiple segments. How do we bring the best of our minds together to ensure that we can optimize our software engineering capabilities to suit these different types of markets? And it needs that kind of deliberate thinking and probing and questioning amongst multidisciplinary teams within the organization, because sometimes a lot of what I hear in the financial services space is that, oh, regulator, compliance, etc., right? And those are the things that I hear. But the bottom line is that those are not necessary. It's really about how do we design and not throw away compliance requirements, but innovate around compliance requirements. And then again, do we need to build a full product set now, or can we build it iteratively? So what do we need to do now? What is needed now, right? What can we do later? In other words, what is a must-have today, and what is a nice-to-have or a future feature? And a lot of the time, because we don't do that level of analysis and decomposition, we're trying to build one almighty June product, right? And that product takes longer time and it costs more money. So what we're saying is that with this kind of approach, you start with building the simple first, and then you begin to onboard, right? Get people using it, and then you begin to extend the features and build network effects. So it's also about the strategy you deploy in the product development process. All right, but it needs all our minds, both our strategic, our finance, etc. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Very, very handy.
Great. So
yeah, it came in very, very handy.
Sorry?
It came in very, very handy, like the explanation.
Oh, great. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad. So Tolulokwe is asking, what about customers that are not readily accessible to financial service providers? For example, customers in remote areas. Fantastic question. This calls for a strategic relationship between FSPs and development programs who mostly implement projects in this area. Tolulokwe, you've hit the nail on the head. So this goes back to opportunities when you look at your journey map, right? So if a customer is in a rural area and is accessing healthcare, for example, then how do we use that healthcare provider to be that point of introduction or building awareness, right? And that's the way we need to start thinking, because again, in everything that we do, one of the things we did last year in our research was talking about partnerships. Partnerships help us build network effects and scale. Right? So if somebody is doing agriculture in the village, in that remote area that you want to locate, how do we use that as an opportunity to say, oh, how do we ensure that your financial flows, which is what we're focusing on, are integrated within your agriculture and information flows? And those are the opportunities we need to build on, right? Thank you. And Emmanuel has also answered some of that in the chat as well. Thank you. How can we address onboarding aspect of customer journey with regulatory requirements and the perception of customers? Okay. So the whole idea of this is the regulatory requirements. Again, you have to look at it and say, what do they have? Again, if you look at what's been going on with the telcos and onboarding and this issue about NIN-SIM integration, what have the telcos done? They've backward integrated and said, we will register your NIN for you, right? So how do you also make these things accessible to the customers that you're trying to serve? If they have a problem with regulatory needs, how do we close that gap for them rather than just folding our arms and saying A, B, C, D, E, because that's a value-added service. And if you don't do it, somebody else will do it, okay? So it's really about, again, expanding our minds around partnerships, around what is possible, around how do we onboard? Or if you're not going to onboard yourself, how do you get somebody who already has the onboarding capabilities to come periodically to your own location or whatever to do that onboarding? Okay? It takes a village. You're absolutely correct, Baba Tolulokwe, and that's why we're all here. And the village includes, so for example, if somebody is already buying, if somebody is already purchasing MTN's or Lumos rechargeable light and Lumos rechargeable energy, and all these people that are already using renewables, how do we engage them in use of and be the financial product provider for those kinds of things? Opportunities and how we're trying to capitalize on the different opportunities that we see in the marketplace without thinking that we must do everything directly and independently. So partnerships, again, like I said, observations. The woman in the market, how is she buying her airtime? How is she doing this? How is she doing that? And by the time you start to pose those types of use case questions, then you begin to understand that there's opportunities everywhere, okay? Thank you for those questions. Don't worry, if you have any more, we're still here for more. So we'll now hand over into our group activity, and we just have about 30 minutes for this. And the group activities, again, you're going to go into rooms and you'll be given the customer journey template. We want you to assign somebody who is a timekeeper to manage your time, somebody who is going to be your spokesperson to come back and debrief, and then somebody who is going to sort of be your team champion, right? So the whole idea now is to go into groups, and I'll hand over to Ibuku to tell us how our groups are going to work, but it's really to think about the problem and a solution idea and build a customer journey map for this segment. So Ibuku, how do you want to do this? Oops.
Right. Thank you very much, Prof. Wow, that was very, very engaging and exciting. And I'm sure, everyone else is, as excited as I am. I'm sure we learned a lot, but, we're moving to the next stage now to sort of get our hands involved in trying to build out customer journey maps. You'll be going to your breakout rooms right now. Those breakout rooms, in the first slide, there is a scenario that has been painted, which will just sort of summarize what you'll be doing, and then we'll get started. We have limited time, so we have to hit the ground running, so to say. With that, we can go ahead into our respective breakout rooms. Just kindly accept the invitation to the breakout room so we can get started. Thank you.
Hello, Ma, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Have
Sorry,
you selected your group?
yeah, I joined the meeting very late. I was having network issues. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, so you have to accept your group invitation. There's a group invitation for everybody, and you have to accept that and join a group. So it's better you join a group so you don't miss out again.
Okay, Ma.
Yes.
Hello, Ma.
Yes. Hi, John.
Yeah, sorry, I accepted the farmer group loan earlier, but I wanted to join the other group. That's the savings group loan. That's the one I
Okay, so
actually wanted to join. So, but
okay,
you've already
let me
accepted me
find
on that. So I had
let
to
me
come
find
out
the
of
book
it.
and see if you can move. Let me just find the book. Just a minute.
Thank you.
Oh. Okay. Hello, Ma, please, I'm unable to join a group. I've been tapping, but it's not adding me. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
let me just, yes, I can hear you. Let me just get someone who has the host rights to be able to move people. Just a minute.
Okay.
We'll go to group 5.
It was
Group 5, what
interesting.
did we...
Group
Okay.
3, please, man.
Okay, go ahead,
Yeah.
Rosa.
Yeah, it was really interesting and impactful also. You say in one word anyway, it was interesting.
Okay, but I said, what did we learn in one sentence? What did we learn?
Okay. It gave us an insight of, let me use the word macaro, that's the name we gave to the rural woman. And we could see that initially there was this fear, doubt, are they trustworthy? And the constant scene of the roving agent and the agent, sitting agent displaying a safe for better life gave her a second thought that makes her to like feel, oh, let me just give it a try. And when she actually did, she received an alert immediately. And our customers also be able to transfer money to our account, and she received an alert on it. So then I gave her, she was dancing in her shop that, this thing is a better thing. No. So it was really interesting.
Okay, so we learned to put ourselves in the world of the customer we're trying to serve.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thanks. Great, Ehosa. Group 5.
Yes, we learned about a farmer, Mr. Sonny, who was introduced to a new savings product and the skepticism and anxiety. And after some time, he became a sustained user and eventually an ambassador of the products.
Okay, great. So again, the two things that resonate is there's a bit of a block initially. So how we approach the customer is also important. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shegun.
It does. The approach matters, yes.
Exactly. So that's the second thing where, because there's that skepticism. Right, great. Thank you, Shegun. That's all group 3, group 5. Group 1.
Good afternoon. Okay, so basically, in our own case, we learned how to simplify the journey for a petty trader, all the way from onboarding till they became an advocate. And in this case, also still trying to bring in other people, so that in the course of transacting. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
great. Thank you, Group 1. So Group 1's message is simple is it, right? Simple works. We don't have to be as elaborate or, big feature, but let's be simple. Thank you very much, Adekunle, in Group 1. Group 4.
Okay, for Group 4. Hello, good afternoon, Prof.
Good afternoon. Hi, Professor. How are
good.
You?
I'm good. I said Group 4, it was quite interesting. We tried to map the customer journey of a petty trader for the loan product we are building. I think the key thing for us is that this task made us to try to understand the mind of the customer, the thought process of the customer, what goes on in the mind of the customer. And most importantly, because of the adoption and every other thing associated with the product, the customer now had the opportunity of earning money from the product, because when we started our loyalty reward, because of the referrals the customer was doing, ordinarily just buying the product was not enough. The customer also went for that to start earning income by doing referral marketing for us. I think that was quite interesting.
Okay, so again, you got a way to incentivize the customer as part of your offering, and that also gives the customer more motivation to use.
Yes, sure.
Yes. So what I'm hearing is that, just capitalizing on the different opportunities that are available, but we might not be seeing at the moment. Fantastic. Thank you, Group 4. Group 2.
Good afternoon, everyone. For us, we actually learned a lot. First of all, simplicity. That was the first thing we learned, that, okay, we have a good product, we don't need to make it complex. Then secondly, we also learned how to identify the needs of our customers. Then one major key thing that we actually did was the fact that we didn't just sit in the city, we took the products to the farmers in the rural area as well. So we're able to bridge that gap between those who stays behind the walls with AC. We went to the field to introduce our product to the customers and solve a problem. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Damien.
Awesome.
And that's fantastic. Thanks for that. And I think that it's a good thing that you brought that up, because when you think about people like farmers or petty traders or market women, they don't leave their shops. So if you think you want to reach them, you also have to go out and say, how do we get there? So that also means that, again, we're trying to build digital products, but what is the blend that we need to use in terms of high touch versus low touch to ensure that we can achieve our goals and objectives? Last but not the least, group 6. Did we have a group 6?
Yes, we did.
Or they've gone AWOL. Okay, no one from group 6? Azuka, you're unmuted. Are you in group 6?
Zena, Zara.
They're shy. Okay, no problem. But ladies and gentlemen, I think that the most important thing is what you learned, not what we said, and your ability to action what we've just seen. So what we hope that we can do as next steps is that you continue using these tools as next steps. You also engage with us. I think, Ibukun, correct me if I'm wrong, the product development lab toolkit is actually online and it's available for everybody to use and try out.
Yes.
So please feel free, Ibukun, if you can put the link in the chat, feel free to download it. If you have any questions, please let us know. But we just felt that this was an important way of sensitizing and building awareness as well of some of the resources that are available to you as financial service providers to ensure that we can achieve the goals of financial inclusion. And it's 1:01, and that's 1 minute beyond our time. Any final questions before we say goodbye this time around? Any final questions? Okay, so if there are no final questions, I'm just waiting for Ibukun to post the. Yes, go ahead.
Please, I joined late.
Go ahead,
on this program. I said I joined late. I don't know if we'll be having access to the materials and the toolkits for this session.
Yes, you will. You will get access to the
Thank you very
materials
much.
and the toolkits. The toolkit is already available online and for all to use. So Ibukun, are you sharing the link?
Yes, I will.
Okay, the toolkit is already available online. So if you just, once you get it and you read it, if you have any questions or have any needs or anything, kindly email us and then we'll only be too happy to respond and engage with you. Yeah, so Ibukun is trying to, I don't know, Ibukun is trying to drop the link. So that, I think that's an important part. So it's, yeah, and all the things I mentioned, Damien, regarding your earlier questions about the opportunity, the household map, and so all those things are already in the toolkit. So there's an opportunity brief that we get you to fill out and looking at your internal capabilities, what's the management what's the management sense, etc., etc. So all those things are already embedded in the toolkit. And like I said, it's a three-dimensional, it's a three-phase toolkit. The first phase is prepare, the second phase is prototype, and the third phase is pilot. And in addition to that toolkit, we also have an addendum for people who want to develop women's products, right? That takes into consideration some of the needs. Ibukun, you're not muted. Ibukun, you're not muted. Yes. You know, so it's about, so we also have a product for women around in terms of how do you build and develop women's products and services, because we know that the needs of women, the nuances of women are also different. So we also have a toolkit that focuses specifically on women, and hopefully we'll use that as well to support the drive to address women's financial inclusion and close the gap. Okay, thank you very much. I will now hand over back to Timothy for the sign off and final words. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Prof. And I believe it was a very interesting session, very engaging. I know in my own breakout room where, very enthusiastic about, the entire process. So before we close, I'd just like to, for the sake of those who joined late, I'd just like to quickly tell you about our product development lab. So this was just the tip of the iceberg. So our product development lab is actually built on human-centered design principles. And what we do is to get FSPs, to create compelling value propositions for excluded segments particularly adopting the human-centered design principles. So as much as possible, we get FSPs to engage with the customers you are designing for, so that at the end of the day, you are getting their feedback and using that feedback to iterate the products that you're actually developing for your target segments. So the lab is actually, we're actually taking applications for the lab frequently. So if you're interested in the lab, you can reach out to me or any of my colleagues. We'll be happy to give you more information about the lab and hopefully get you on board as well. So thank you very much to everyone who have participated in today's session. We look forward to more engagement with you and hopefully, to hear from you regarding the product development lab as well. So because I shared the link to the toolkits, please do well to access the tools and all our reports and assets that we curate on our website as well. And we'll be happy, to engage further on this. Okay.
Yes, I also shared the general page of toolkits because that also has the human-centered development customer segmentation framework toolkit that we built that gives us 6 personas of the excluded and underserved in Nigeria. Thank you all very much. Thank you and goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you,
Prof.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ma.